Welcome to Off the Shelf. I'm your host, Yvonne Wolf. Today, our special guest is Glenview author and retired Army Major General James Mukoyama with his book, Faith, Family, and Flag. Welcome, General.
Thank you very much, Yvonne.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and you've been a long-term resident of Glenview. But what motivated you to write this book?
I was motivated, basically, I have a daily standard mantra, which is every day is a great day. I have my faith, my family, and live in the finest country in the world. Being a military guy, I'm mission-oriented or driven. And my mission, and that's the purpose of the book, by the way, is to demonstrate the blessings and influence of God in my life and all of the blessings that He has given me. And I try to detail those through my 8 decades of life.
Yes, it's an incredible life you've led. I enjoy your book. It was beginning with your heart attack, and you still say that day you're going to the hospital. That today, every day is a great day.
Yes,
just incredible.
Yeah, I'm an Agent Orange survivor. For those in the audience who don't know what Agent Orange was, it was a herbicide that was sprayed in Vietnam to kill plants, especially alongside roads or areas where the enemy could hide and ambush us. Unfortunately, it was not known at that time the very bad effects health-wise. There are something like 14 different chronic diseases that have evolved from veterans who have been exposed to Agent Orange. The most well-known of those are heart problems, cancer, diabetes. So about 13 years ago, I had a heart attack. And then I had diabetes type 2, and my kidneys failed. And so I had to go into dialysis, which I did for about 3 or 4 months, and then I got a donor. And which is highly unusual because the donor list for kidney transplants is quite extensive. The donor was our daughter. But our daughter is not our biological daughter. We had adopted her 30 years earlier, and yet she was a match. So it's what I refer to in my book as a God thing. My whole life has just been a series of God things. So
many God things, yes.
Yeah, so when people hear me say every day is a great day, they said, how can you be so positive? Now I can tell them, well, if you read my book, you'll see why. In fact, how can I not be so positive?
It's an incredible book. I also like how there's many funny stories in there too.
Well, I tried.
Humor.
I tried. You know, God has a sense of humor, and sometimes you can't see it when you're going through it, but later on you understand. And I've just been truly blessed with a wonderful family, beautiful wife, inside and out, and who has been together with me for 53 years. And I haven't been the best husband. I've had anger management problems, and she, bless her soul, has stuck it out. And we have 2 wonderful children who have supported us and are fine people, and we're very blessed.
Oh, there's so many things to cover, but let's say, who was your intended audience originally when you wrote this book? I think you have so many God things to share with us, but who was your initial, maybe the audience you thought?
First of all, this book I never intended to write a book. That was not on my bucket list.
No, okay. For English major? No.
Yeah, I did major in English, and I I got my master's in the teaching of social studies, but I majored in Far Eastern affairs, which has helped me a great deal because I had 2 combat tours, one in
Korea?
the Demilitarized Zone of Korea and one in Vietnam.
Right.
But having said that, I have a very dear friend of mine. His name is Alan Lynch. He is a Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. And he actually lives in Gurnee, and he wrote a book himself. And Al was a first sergeant of mine in the Army. It's a small world. and he has a foundation, and he asked me if I would give the invocation at one of his dinners. And I was very honored to do so. And I was talking to him and outside in a hallway with some other friends, veterans, all veterans, and I was just talking a little bit about my life, and he said, "You know, General, you should write a book." and I just poo-pooed it, and I said, "You know, I don't think anybody would be interested. I'm just a regular guy." And the people there all jumped on me and said, "No, you need to do this." I thought about it overnight. Next morning, I emailed both Al and another person who was Andrew Tangen, superintendent of Lake County Veterans Assistance Commission.
Okay.
Andrew was actually the guy who suggested I do it, and Al supported it. And I said, "Are you guys serious? Do you think this might have any traction?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Absolutely." So I said, "Okay, I'm in." So then what I did, being not only military, but I'm a pretty logical guy in the way I approach life. And so the first thing I said, all right, I'm writing the book. Why am I writing this? You know, and that's when I came up with my purpose, to demonstrate the blessings and influence of God in my life. Okay, who is my target audience? I came up with 4. Actually. And by the way, the subtitle of the book is Memoirs of an Unlikely American Samurai Crusader.
Exactly.
So,
there's an oxymoron in there somewhere, right?
So basically, I said, all right, number 1, the most important audience to me is people of faith or people needing faith or purpose in their lives. Number 2 is the military community, because I spent 32 years in the military, and I've been devoting the rest of my life helping our military community. Number 3 is minorities, because I am one. My father was an immigrant. My wife is an immigrant. And so I basically... that was the 3rd audience. The 4th is the youth of our nation, who basically, I believe, have not been given in the recent decades the foundation about the history of our nation and the exceptionalism of the United States. The generosity, the charity, the things that we have done to change the world.
Yes, this incredible thing that America has done for the world. Yes, that is definitely. I tell my kids that I would not be alive without American involvement in World War II. My grandmother would not be alive. You see, all these incredible changes that America has done for the world. And so the first of your group, people of faith and people who needs it. I think you covered about everyone, right?
Well, that is, you know, I mentioned, you know, my father was an immigrant.
Yes.
I'm from Chicago, born and raised in the Logan Square area.
Yes,
It was a great neighborhood, primarily Polish and German and Italian at that time.
Yes, and you grew up with...
And us, our family, we were literally the only Asian family at that time. Our grammar school of 900 kids, my brother and I were the only Asians in that school. So We lived in a tenant apartment building. We never owned a home. My dad had a small business.
A gift shop.
Yeah, a gift
Yes.
shop on Milwaukee Avenue, Logan Square. And the reason I mention this is that America is the land of opportunity and freedom. And that's why my dad came here. That's why my wife came here, so that they could pursue whatever in life they wanted to, and they knew they could do it if you work hard and you obey the law.
Right.
You have a chance to do anything. And when I joined the military, there had never been an Asian American general or admiral. Now, I wasn't the first. I was like the third. But the club isn't that big.
But then when you were growing up, you weren't aiming to be a general because you...
No, I wasn't. But it was part of my Japanese heritage, which is the samurai tradition. The samurai, the warrior in Japan at that time in society, was the highest level in society you could be. Unlike the Chinese culture, where the scholar or the academician was the top of the social class.
Yes, and that's again something that you mentioned very well in the book, and I think that your style, when you mention about your audience, your writing style is very succinct and very to the point. There's something that's very easy for people to read.
Yeah, and when I wrote the book, as I said, I had no plan to do this, so I didn't have notes or things like that for the book. But once I started writing, it just kind of flowed, and that's not me. That was God really helping me and directing me, and so I wrote the book in 3 months.
No, I can't imagine that.
It was
That's
done
incredible.
in 3 months, and as I was writing, I would finish a chapter and I'd give it to my wife, and I'd say, could you please look at this? I said, but don't tell me anything now, because I was just literally churning these things out. And so when I finished the manuscript in 3 months, it was 18 chapters, about 39,000 words. Now, I had never written a book, so I didn't know it was this small, medium, or large, right? But it's 39,000 words, and I had epilogue and all this, and I thought it was decent, And my wife does one of these things, and she said, "Well, let's talk about this. There are a few things that we need to consider, right? The final product is about 25 chapters, 55,000 words, and so obviously I had left out a few things, but we've been married 53 years, so she kind of knows the story."
I think my question was also, when you have so many years of experience, and it's hard to write a short book, I would think you would have to do a lot of editing to make it smaller. But it sounds like you went from 18 chapters to 25.
Yeah, and I had my publisher did have a editor or a person who helped me with the book, but she was very good, but like 98% of the book is my initial manuscript.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that your book is also for minorities, and you explain your identity very clearly in the first few chapters. Can you tell us the difference between Japanese American, the term Japanese American, and American of Japanese descent?
Yes, I prefer the term AJA, which is American of Japanese ancestry, because I'm American first. Yes. My father emphasized to my brother and I are the history and values of the Japanese culture, but he said, you have been born in this country. You are citizens of the United States. This is your country. You should take the best of the Japanese culture, add it to the best of the American culture, which is so diverse,
Yes.
and make the country the best it can be.
But we have so much in common, right, with your Polish and German neighbors.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah,
you
and
grew up with.
you know, especially immigrants. Immigrants come to this country and they want to assimilate. They want to work hard because they know that is the path to success. And so when I was young, I never felt poor because I had a strong faith, strong family. Our church was only, Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, and every neighborhood has core elements at that time, for sure.
Yes.
This is before the internet and online shopping and all that.
And
So
gentrification, all that stuff.
yeah, so every neighborhood had a church of some kind. It had a grocery store. It had a bar.
Yes. A local pub.
Had a butcher shop. Had a barber shop. And so our church was 3 blocks from our house.
You walked to church, right?
Every Sunday, we'd walk as a family. We would put on our so-called Sunday best clothes. That's
Yes.
what you did in those days.
Yes.
And we would walk to church as a family.
Well, what is you mentioned about Vietnam War, and now that was a very difficult time for this whole country, but you touch on how difficult it was to come back to America.
Yes.
And your fellow, servicemen.
And so there's something that I'd like to address, which is I did start a 501c3 faith-based organization called Military Outreach USA. We have 2 major programs. One is to help homeless veterans coming off the street through a network of houses of worship of all faith and American Legion Post, VFW, that means Veteran Service Organizations,
Yes.
and schools. A lot of high schools have joined and help contribute items to these homeless veterans.
Yes. And you have another purpose.
Yeah, the second major purpose, which is my passion, is to reduce the high suicide rate among our veterans. 22 plus veterans per day are dying by suicide.
It's very sad statistic.
Yeah. And so you're asking me about Vietnam. One of the major contributing factors, which is not known very much, is an invisible wound of war called moral injury. Moral injury, simply stated, is from the time you're 18 years old, you develop a personal moral code, a sense of right or wrong that could come from your family, religion, whatever. Then you join the military. You learn a warrior code. That code, unfortunately, can transform your personal moral code somewhat. Then you might have to participate in activities or operations that violate your personal moral code, such as killing.
Yes.
You don't have to be the person that pulls the trigger. You could be a witness, or you could feel you should have prevented it. There is survivor's guilt also.
True.
But in military operations, you're constantly moving. You don't have time to stop and reflect on this stuff. So what do? You bury it. It becomes unresolved guilt and shame. Then you come back to the States. Maybe you get out of the military and something triggers it. Unless you have a strong coping mechanism for that or a strong support group, bad things happen: anger, depression, suicide. It's the position of Military Outreach USA that the main approach for moral injury is not a medical doctor with prescription drugs. It's the forgiveness and grace of a moral authority, a loving God, the counseling of clergy and sensitive therapists, and the support of a spiritual community and family.
So you need professionals who are familiar with this particular community.
That's right.
Yes.
And that's the mission of military outreach. So I go throughout the country giving speeches to universities, to medical organizations.
Yes,
I've
yes.
spoken to the American Psychological Association.
Yes.
I've spoken to medical schools on the West Coast because, surprisingly, moral injury is not very well known. You would think.
This is the first time I heard about when I read your book, and I would think that it's something that's stressed in psychology or therapy, right?
Right.
But it's very shocking, or for me, and another shocking thing you mention in your book is that here I thought the suicide rate was high because there may be 30-year-old soldiers.
Actually,
it's not true.
the majority of those dying by suicide are the older vets. It's not the younger ones. So it's because, just think about it. When you're in your 50s, you're kind of like at a stage in life where empty nesters, your career is probably peaked, and what happens is you have time to think, and that's what happens.
Ruminate. Wow. Well, I just find that to be so much to do in that area that we would love to hear more about that. But let's look at your book again. Now, your cover, how did you decide on that particular picture? Now, that is
that's interesting. Yeah. When I envisioned the cover for because I'm a pretty detailed guy again, I did not envision it having my photograph on it. I envisioned symbols of the three themes.
Yes.
You know, faith, family, and
flag.
Country, you know, flag, right? So I was, in my mind, thinking of symbols that would be on the cover. But my publisher, and I was very blessed with the publisher, his name is Jocko Willink, very famous Navy SEAL author,
and podcaster.
Martial arts guy, podcast. I was on his podcast about 6 years ago, and so he's very popular. And so when I completed my manuscript, I sent it around to different people that are fairly well known, you know. And I was saying, could you please read this? And if you think it's worthy, could you kind of throw me a bone, like a couple sentences about, you know, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread? And so he contacted me, and he said, you know, I really liked the book. And he said, do you have a publisher? And I said, well, no, I've never done this before. You know, I'm just in the process of trying to see if it's worthy of any attention. And he said, General, I have a publishing company. If you want it published, I'll do it. End of conversation. And that's one of the God things that happened.
You didn't have to look for a publisher.
No, I didn't. I trusted him. He's a fellow veteran, and you know, he gave me he sent me a contract, and I just read it, and I said, okay, that's it.
Usually our guests tell us stories about a journey that takes 2 years to find a publisher. So I can see how your book just fast-tracked it, right, with a publisher that practically offered.
I had tried another publisher, but there was no interest in it. So, I knew I just have to keep on trying.
And speaking of that, what are some of the reader responses for your book?
I've been, I shouldn't say surprised, I've been very pleased with some very moving responses on my book, especially about the moral injury, about the minority thing, about our country, the patriotism in our country. And so, for example, I got a letter from a veteran who basically said I saved his life. I can't tell you how many times I've given that speech about moral injury,
Yes.
and veterans have come up to me after the speech with tears in their eyes, saying that I've been told I have PTSD, but I know I don't have PTSD. I've been told I have traumatic brain injury. I don't have that.
Yes.
I have moral injury. So now they can go and get the treatment that they need
Yes.
from therapists, talk to their clergy, and I've spoken at 2 high schools in this area. Well, actually more than that, but the one high school, Evanston High School, I spoke at, and there are many Hispanics there, and one guy comes up to me afterwards, and he's I think he was a sophomore, but he had just come to America, and so he couldn't express himself like he wanted to in English, so he had another classmate translate for him.
Yes.
And he thanked me for encouraging him as a minority, because he heard my story and he saw it, and so that was very encouraging. I had another high school student at Glenbrook South, I might add, who was just a freshman. He was actually 8th grade student at Springman, and middle school.
When he heard you speak? Or?
Yeah, and he basically said that he liked the book. He wrote a report on the book, and he got a good grade on it, so that was good. But he said that I'm not a person of faith, but since I've read the book, I'm going to give it another look.
Yes.
And that to me was priceless.
Yes, I think your book will be inspire so many people, especially about you touch on all the ancient cultures who have a way to welcome back soldiers. Well, let's see, what connects you to Glenview? Now, you are a resident here over 40 years?
Yeah, we actually built a home here 43 years ago. And the reason we moved to Glenview is we had friends here, especially the major attraction was the school system here. Now, of course, it's locally convenient too for, you can get right on the tollway, or you can get on Edens and
or the train,
go downtown.
Right?
Yeah, the Metro train, which I rode for many years. We had some very dear friends that I talk about in the book who mentored us. They happened to be a Japanese-American couple, and it's been a wonderful experience. I've also spoken here in Glenview. Our church, which is the main attraction for me today in our lives, is our church, which is Hope Community Church in Glenview, a relatively new church. We're only 3 years old, but
wow. God
has been very generous, and we've got about 1,000 people now.
Wow, that is incredible for a new church. But well, thank you, Jim, for joining us today.
Well, it's been an honor and privilege, and I just want to encourage anybody who's thinking of writing a book to, number one, be passionate about whatever subject you're going to address. Number two is to determine your purpose, and 3 is determine your audience.
Well, thank you. That's just what our writers need to keep going with their manuscript.
Well, you're welcome.
Well, thank you. And thank you for watching. Join us next time on Off the Shelf.